Lego's collabed with hundreds of companies, but a lot of them fall flat on their face. From the recent Crocs collab that was completely ironic to collabs so old you didn't even know they happened. These are some Lego collabs that completely failed. Starting with the brick clog. This dropped in February of this year, and on paper, it sounds kind of fun. But when you actually look at it, this thing is an absolute joke. Jay from Jay's Brick Vlog reviewed it and basically just called it a collectible, not actual footwear. And after you find out the details, it's pretty hard to disagree. For starters, each one weighs around 3 pounds. On top of that, they're made from hard foam, not the soft, squishy feeling people are used to from Crocs. And they cost $150. But the craziest part is they sold out almost immediately. The set came with a little minifigure wearing tiny versions of them, which just makes it feel like even more of a display piece. Lego knew exactly what they were doing here, and everybody fell for it anyway. But at least this was on purpose, because the Happy Meal toys were weird by accident. In 1999, Happy Meal toys were still actual Lego bricks, but in 2001, they switched to Bionicle sets, which weren't traditional bricks, but they were at least part of a real Lego theme. But then 2002 happened, and Lego used their McDonald's collab to promote Galidor. They were chunky 3 or 4 piece action figure bodies with no regular Lego compatibility whatsoever. Brickset straight up called them appalling and said they had no resemblance to regular Lego parts. So what you had was a Happy Meal promotion for a theme nobody liked, using toys that didn't even feel like Lego during a time where the company was already going bankrupt. Honestly, I'm surprised this didn't completely kill them. This wasn't their first collab with McDonald's either, and there's a similar story with Nike. Lego and Nike announced a collab in 2024, and everybody acted like it was brand new, but it wasn't. 22 years earlier, Lego and Nike launched Bionicle by Nike. These were kids' shoes inspired by the Toa Nuva era, and the gimmick was genuinely wild. The shoe came with a removable Tahu Nuva mask on the toe box, and you could buy more masks separately to swap in if you wanted to. So it was a wearable version of Bionicle's mask collecting. They retailed for $50, and the extra mask packs were $9.95, so I can kind of see why it didn't do very well. They were just a little too expensive. But now we're going way back, because as weird as the shoe collabs are, Lego's collab history goes back a lot further than most people realize. In 1967, during the Samsonite era, Lego released promotional sets with Kraft Velveeta, like the cheese. You couldn't buy these in a store. They were mail-away sets, which means you had to mail in a certain amount of stuff to get them. Kind of like box tops on cereal, if you guys remember those. Now, the sets themselves were nothing crazy, but they came in boxes with absolutely nothing on them. We've seen plain boxes somewhat recently, but for it to happen this long ago is pretty crazy, especially since it was with a food company. And speaking of food collabs, in 2007, Lego did something way different. They made the food itself a Lego product. Kellogg's released Lego Eggo waffles that looked like Lego. The box told kids to toast, break, and build. The idea was that you could snap the waffle apart into small sections and build with them. Obviously, they were still waffles, so the building system was more of a joke than anything else. But that's what makes it so good. Lego My Eggo became Lego My Eggo, but for some reason, it didn't last. And people have been copying it ever since. But if cheese and waffles weren't enough, in 1985, Lego somehow ended up connected to Crest, toothpaste, and Pepsi at the same time. Set 1562 was a basic set that promoted both brands for some reason. Toothpaste and soda have nothing to do with each other and nothing to do with Lego, but that was kind of how promotional toy marketing worked in the 80s. Brands needed exciting toys to sell regular stuff, and a handful of bricks felt like a real toy no matter how small the set was. But a promotional set that makes a little more sense is the Duracell Bad Guy from 2006. Set 7217 was a 16-piece Bionicle set that came with Duracell AA batteries. Brick Economy lists two variants, one version with a 12-pack and another with an 8-pack. So the logic was actually pretty sound. Bionicle's audience was kids who had battery-powered toys, and Duracell's audience was everyone who was buying batteries for those toys. So they just combined it. Buy batteries, get a tiny Bionicle villain. It makes sense. It's just kind of strange when you look at it now. This next one was a Japan exclusive, and it's one of the weirdest ones in this video. Set 1237 is a Technic build of ASIMO, Honda's famous humanoid robot. So already you've got Lego Technic, a real car company, a humanoid robot, and it's only available in Japan. But it gets even better, because Brickset published an article about a rare white Technic pin found inside the set that might be one of the rarest Technic pieces ever produced. So the set is strange on two completely different levels. The whole concept is a Honda exclusive Lego robot, and it has one of the rarest Technic pieces ever made. This thing is an absolute curveball, but Honda wasn't even close to the first car brand Lego worked with. That was Volkswagen in 1958. Set 307-2 was a Lego showroom that came with Volkswagen branded toy cars, and Brick Nerd identifies it as one of the earliest collab sets Lego ever made. Think about how early that is. It was literally before the modern day brick even existed. Early Lego was basically a model town system where real world vehicles and buildings made total sense, so Volkswagen fit right in. It's technically the ancestor of every Speed Champion set, Creator Expert set, and licensed vehicle Lego's made since. It just happened in 1958 in a way almost nobody talks about. And Volkswagen wasn't even the only collab that was this early. Most fans know about Lego's partnership with Shell, but Esso came first. Brick Nerd traces some of Lego's earliest sets with them back to the 1950s, including Esso filling stations as part of the old Lego Town Plan sets. Shell eventually showed up in 1966 and stayed all the way until 2014. But Esso was already there in the 50s, and even Exxon had its own American partnership from 1979 to 1984. The Lego Exxon gas station is now a genuinely valuable vintage set. So when people were pissed about the Shell partnership, what they didn't realize is that Lego's always been in business with oil companies. But now I want to talk about a side of Lego that most people don't even know exists: airline sets. In 1989, Emirates Airlines got a Lego set. It was a small jet with Emirates branding in the town theme, and obviously a collab with the United Arab Emirates. The craziest part though was they sold these on the airplane, so a kid could get one and build the plane they're flying in. But here's where it gets really interesting. Emirates wasn't alone. Lego made sets of planes for Aeroflot, ANA, Austrian Air, Iberia, JAL, and a bunch of others, and they each came with their own sticker sheets. This trend died out a long time ago, but for a while, Lego had an entire sub-theme dedicated to real-life airlines. But if this was unexpected, government sets are even weirder. In the 1980s, Lego partnered with Air Canada and Canada Post. These are not consumer brands. They're part of the Canadian government. The sets are pretty hard to track down, but if you know where to look, you'll see that they made a good amount of them. A Canadian kid in the late 80s could easily add these to their Lego town, and they would fit right in. This is something Lego City has literally never had. Sets based on stuff from real life that makes sense for a city. But now we need to talk about ferries, because this history is its own entire rabbit hole. Set 1054 is exactly what it looks like. A Lego model of a Stena Line ferry, available through the actual ferry company. And the concept is kind of genius when you think about it. You're on the ferry, you go to the gift shop, and you buy a Lego set of the ferry you're currently on. It turns the whole trip into something collectible. These sets were obviously never going to be huge worldwide sellers, since the target audience was specifically people that were actually on the boat. But Stena Line is just the beginning, because Color Line, a Norwegian ferry company, got enough sets to feel like an unofficial theme. Wikipedia lists multiple of them: the Color Line ferry, the container truck, and others like 2186, 2187, and 2188. Brick Economy tells us that the main ferry dropped in 1993, and it was based on a real ship called the Christian IV. This set had 241 pieces, and even though that's not that many, it made a genuinely good-looking boat. Colorline got a good amount of sets, but then there's the Finnjet. Finnjet was a very specific ferry because it only ran between Finland and Germany, and the company that made it is way too foreign for me to pronounce. They only ever got this one set, but it's because it's based on a very famous ferry called the GTS Finnjet. When it was still running, it was the fastest, longest, and biggest car ferry in the world, and the only one powered by gas turbines. So for the people that paid attention to ferries, this thing was genuinely groundbreaking. And since Denmark is literally in between the two countries it traveled to, it makes sense why Lego made a set about it back in the day. But this next one is hilariously weird. In 1966, Lego made a promotional set for Velux, a company that makes windows and skylights. Set 1854 is a 144-piece Lego house with roof windows. That's it. A window company wanted to advertise their product, so Lego made a house that shows it off and sold it. It's a lot like the Pepsi and Crest collab I talked about earlier, but this one actually makes sense. And yet they only ever got one set, while Danone, on the other hand, somehow ended up with an entire collection. And by the way, Danone is a yogurt company. Wikipedia lists a bunch of different sets as Lego and Danone collabs, and I'm sure you noticed it too. They all kind of suck. The craziest part though is they were making these sets for years, from 1980 all the way up to 1998. So this wasn't one random giveaway with yogurt. This was 18 years of sets handed out through European dairy promotions. I think I'm really starting to understand why Lego almost went bankrupt before Bionicle, especially because Danone isn't the only dairy company Lego's collabed with. Tine is a Norwegian dairy brand that started in 1928, and for some reason, Lego collabed with them in 1999 and made a milk truck for the town theme. Just like a lot of these sets, this one was also 100% free, and considering it had 95 pieces and a minifigure, they definitely lost some money. Although they did cut corners pretty hard. The minifig's torso isn't even printed, it's a sticker. So that tells you how little money they really had back then. But then there's Arla. I guess one Scandinavian milk truck wasn't enough. There's also the Arla milk delivery truck and dairy tanker sets, which were collabs with MD Foods and Arla. With all of these dairy brands, it's starting to feel like Lego had an entire unofficial dairy universe. All of these sets were just called promotional. They weren't even labeled as actual collabs, like what happens with licensed themes. They were all basically giant ads for these companies. But the craziest food collab in this entire video isn't any of the small ones. It's the Chocomel Chocolate Factory. The Chocolate Factory set was a 236-piece Lego town set that was basically a little piece of a town all in one. It had street, sidewalk, minifigures, and of course, the chocolate factory. This one came out back in 1978, so it actually might have done pretty well since minifigures had just come out. But this is quite literally the only Chocomel set Lego ever made, and it's probably because you couldn't just buy it. You had to get this set by collecting 3 Chocomel seals and then showing them to stores that sold the set. But you know what all of this is a recipe for? Expensive Lego, and this set is definitely one of them. It was only $20 when it came out, and now it's worth almost $2,500. Barely any of them even exist in the aftermarket. So is this one really a failure? Honestly, I don't even know. But did you ever buy anything from any of these collabs? Be sure to let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.